Chase Thomas podcast. My nephew needs me to record. See, I already hate it. I hate it.
All right, hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Chase Thomas Podcast from still the aforementioned Chase Thomas, coming to you live from Knoxville, Tennessee, Everything School HQ. Joining me, Home and Home series with the more important issues, folks. This week on the Chase Thomas Podcast feed, we've got more important issues co-host Landon Raby. Landon, good evening, sir. How are you?
Good, man. Ready to put the ball down and play. That's kind of all I got. I'm excited for this game. I don't know if there's going to be nerves that creep in, but I'm ready to go play.
I love it. Caleb Mitchell, also here, co-host of More Important Issues. Are you also ready to play, or you're like, give me some more time? I'm not emotionally ready for this yet.
I was really happy to get I guess it's been, 3 weeks now since we've seen Tennessee play. I was happy to get the week off after the conference championships, but now I am. It was, by the time Saturday rolled around, this past Saturday, I was thinking, let's get to next Saturday. I'm already starting to get nervous. I just want to play. For better, for worse, I wanted to start.
Yeah. We were talking before off air. I'm just like, it's not going to hit me till Saturday where I'm going to be annoyed. Like, I'm going to be pacing around the house, and my wife's like, I don't really want to do anything because I'm just like, I got something else on my mind. Like, I'm not going to be mentally present on anything else until Tennessee Ohio State kicks off. Late kickoff too. Like, it's going to be a long night, gentlemen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm getting old. We were at a wedding this past Saturday, and I looked at my watch. I looked at my girlfriend. I was like, it's got to be about time to go. Looked at my watch. It was 8:30, and I was like, oh gosh. And then they brought out coffee, and we were able to power through. But there's
at 8:30. Yeah,
I was a 29-year-old drinking coffee. No, it was probably 9:30, 10 by the time I indulged in the coffee. But yeah.
Wait, are you talking about evening?
Oh yeah.
Caffeine, not decaf.
That's what was crazy is I was so exhausted. I do think it kept my mind racing for many dogs and all that stuff by the time we get home, I didn't fall asleep till like 2 a.m. But yeah, but I was tired. I mean, my body was ready. It was ready to shut down on me.
That's bold, man. Doing caffeine at 8:30, 9 o'clock. At our age.
Oh yeah, it was awful. It was a terrible idea, but the whole thing was a terrible idea. So it just it was compounding, you know?
Right.
I mean, I'm over here doing sleepy time tea. Like, I don't care. Like, it's great. A little chamomile, some lavender chamomile to get ready for a good night's sleep. Hey, that's what we're here for. I'm all about good night's sleep where I don't wake up in the middle of the night and everything else. I don't care. No shame. I'm totally fine with it. I was having a little bit of issues this week with my throat from the weekend. Guess what? Got some throat comfort. I don't care that it's called throat comfort, but I had some throat comfort at from Kroger. It's great. It's fantastic. It does the job. Throat comfort. It's not a sponsor, could be, but it's great for your voice because as the three of us do, we talk a lot on this very program. We got to have that in ship shape here. So, Landon, now that we're in game week, your best reason why Tennessee will beat Ohio State on Saturday is what?
They start fast. I think that's the big key in this game. Yeah, you got to keep the foot on the gas, but I feel like with this crowd of Ohio State, I mean, it looks like they're selling all their tickets anyway. Like, they are ready to get rid of Ryan Day and run him out of town. And I just hope Tennessee is ready to start fast and just go ahead and do the inevitable and get Ryan Day out of here. I think that crowd turns on Ohio State pretty fast. I think if they go out and get a 3 and out, Tennessee goes down and scores, like, how many of those people leave? Or how many of those people fire up the X? I don't know what the Wi-Fi situation looks like in Ohio. I assume probably not very great, just with the rest of the city. But what does that look like? Are they having a full-blown meltdown in the first quarter of a playoff game? I would love nothing more.
Yeah, I mean, the start fast aspect, it does feel like to me, Caleb, when you look at what Heupel said this week, where it's really not what he said, it's what he didn't say in terms of like nothing new, where we're going to play the exact same offense, defense, special teams. I anticipate that Tennessee, to Landon's point, is going to try and go for the jugular early. I think they want to because this team, when they start fast, they're just really, really hard to beat, because they can build a lead with this defense, with Tennessee's running game. They can sit on it and they can conserve it. If they get up 2-3 touchdowns, 2-3 scores, like, you feel really good about where Tennessee's at. And with the kind of weather that we're anticipating here on Saturday night, it's going to be hard for a team that is pass heavy, like, and pass dependent like Ohio State is, because I do think Quinton Judkins and Trevion Henderson are not going to run the ball as well against Tennessee's front as they have in previous games. And I think Michigan did a good job of it, showing just how vulnerable Ohio State is when they can't run the football. If they get in a hole to Landon's point, Caleb, I do wonder if Heupel turns it up where the tempo goes and it's like, we want to put this on ice in the first half.
Yeah, and I think that'll be something that will be nice to see if he does. I think that's going to be the only way to really take advantage of this this defense. One of the more talented defenses in the country, statistically speaking, one of the better defenses in the country. I think that's something that we've lost this year, and I don't know if that's just if Heupel's looked at his running back, his quarterback, and said, we don't necessarily need tempo to beat you, but I'd like to see him get back to that, because I think that's a leg up the offense gets, right, is you get to dictate the tempo. So if we do start fast, if we do get a lead fast, sometimes it can turn into 3 and outs, but also it can turn into opportunities like Jalen Hyatt. We haven't seen a Jalen Hyatt-esque run open really this year. Like that, the few times we have, it's been because Dont'e Thornton's caught it and ran to the end zone. He hadn't just been butt naked. And I think Landon pointed out Mike Matthews was Jalen Hyatt open on Dont'e Thornton's touchdown, actually, in the Vanderbilt game. But we haven't seen a lot of that. Tempo allows you to do that. It gets people out of position, creates mismatches. It does a whole lot of things that it doesn't really matter how talented your defense is. Goes into how well prepared, how well coached, and then sometimes it's just nothing you can do about it. And so I'd be interested to see if that tempo does take an uptick. I think that's a signature part of this offense, and we haven't seen it. Hasn't been what 2022 quite was yet.
Yeah. Well, go ahead, Landon.
It's also nothing for Tennessee to kind of do like that Oklahoma game and just do what they do best and run the football.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they are perfectly comfortable in doing that. And I just think they haven't really played with a lead very much in the second half to be able to do that. But I think, like, having a guy just be able to put the game on ice like Dylan Sampson, I think that's more than enough to get the job done, in my opinion, if you have a big lead going in the second half. I have full faith in Dylan Sampson at this point.
This is a question for both of you. What's a big lead in this Ohio State game?
I think 3 scores, like 17 points or more.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think Ohio State can come back from 17 or more.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think 14 points is more like 3 scores with these defenses.
I think it certainly depends on, like, if you're a 14 point lead somehow at halftime, I don't necessarily think you come out and you're just playing the clock and you're just milking it and you're just coming. Dylan Sampson can't run the ball for 2 quarters against this Ohio State defensive line. So I think it's one of those things, like, Josh Heupel's got to be on his best game. He's got to recognize when he's got the offensive personnel in, and the defense has the personnel he wants in. And I mean, that's when you've got to say, all right, we're going NASCAR, we used to call it. We're going NASCAR here, and everything's fast. They're not subbing. We're gonna make these guys make plays. And so I think there's definitely a balance to it. I'm not asking for him to do that for 60 minutes of the game, because that does create 3 and outs. That you saw it a lot in 2022. But I want to see if he can recognize those scenarios and turn it up and try to flip the field, even if you can't score, but get into scoring position, and whether it's 7 or 3.
Well, I think Indiana drove down the field in their first opening possession in the shoe, and they scored a touchdown, went right down the field. It can be done, and I think it will be important for Tennessee to score. Not one of those fumbles. Like, love DeSamp, but those fumbles on those early drives have been killer for Tennessee, because they have
won every game. Though.
They have won every game. They would have the game. Some of those would have been more comfortable with how they fit. That game would have gone. But I think you just don't want to be in that position where the first opening drive where Tennessee drives down the field and then they get like 3 bad penalties and there's suddenly a 55-yard field goal for Max Gilbert, and then It's just in the bad element. You could just see how you're like, oh man, we were really cooking with something. 6-minute drive, we were pushing the ball down the field, we were doing stuff, and then we got nothing to show for it. Like, you don't want to be in that position here in Columbus, but I do kind of wonder too if it reminds me when you're talking about the points where you feel comfortable as a Vol fan going into maybe halftime here, Caleb, is that like remember 2023 like on the road in Tuscaloosa, Tennessee put it on Alabama. Like they stunned Alabama with their game plan. And part of what Heupel did that kind of caught, I think Nick Saban and company off just not off sides, but just off balance was Joe running the football. Like Joe was doing option stuff. Like Joe was out here lowering her shoulder. Like there was way more read option from Joe Milton in that first half than we'd seen all year long. It's this thing that we wanted to see more of was Joe running with the football. And they didn't have an answer in the first half, but Tennessee didn't finish on a couple of those drives. That was the difference, because if Tennessee is up 3 touchdowns instead of 2 going into the half, I think they win that game, because I think Alabama goes into the half and they're like, wow, that's brutal. But they come out where they're like, oh, we're only down 2 touchdowns. We get the ball back to start off. We score first, 1-score game right out of the gate. So I think that's the kind of difference between like 17 and 21 versus 14 in this game, because I think that we saw in the Alabama game in 23 how big of a difference it is to not finish on just one of those possessions in the red zone last year. That would have been the difference between Tennessee winning in Tuscaloosa for the first time in forever.
Yeah, and part of that too is Tennessee didn't have the composure on offense to sustain that lead either, and that defense isn't quite where it's at now, especially on the outside, to contain some of the athletes that Alabama had that Ohio State now has. But I do think the offense composure is there now. Also, the biggest key to that, and I know Alabama fans would argue with me. That's fine. If Brew McCoy is there in the second half of that Alabama game, I think you have the guy that can get you 3, 4, 6 yards. Is he going to get you more? No, but he's going to make the catch and be on the sticks when you need it. I think that guy changes that game. If you have, especially Joe Milton has that safety valve, and so you have him in that game. You have a possession receiver that can claw your way. You also have Dylan Sampson, who, averaging just under 7 yards a carry right now, which is insane. So yeah, I think this team is more composed to hang on to a lead than any of Josh Heupel's teams at Tennessee. One thing too, and Ohio State, I know, right? Indiana. You mentioned that Indiana game. They scored right before the half. I think there's another game that they scored right before the half too, that really changed the face of the game. That's where I think Tennessee does have a little bit of advantage over anybody else Ohio State's faced this year. That defense is good in crunch time, good in crunch areas. Bend, don't break. You may play on Tennessee's side of the field, but it's going to be tough to get points. It seems, I'm trying to remember the other game it was. Penn State, they didn't. Maybe it was another game that was fairly close at the half. They might have taken the lead, or they may have put it out to 2 scores or something. But I think that's something kind of interesting. Can they carry momentum into halftime? Because they seem to benefit from that many times this year. Can Tennessee stifle that?
Well, and Heupel has been unbelievable in the middle 8 this year. I don't know if y'all looked at his numbers and how Tennessee have just dominated people in the last 4 minutes of the first half and the first 4 minutes of the second half. That'll be key in this game too. Is it Heupel is able to keep that up? Landon is. I think that's very, very possible. And I think to Kale's point, I think Tennessee's defense is going to make. It's just I don't see how this game gets away from Tennessee, and it's just not the same kind of quarterback play at Ohio State. This is not. I'm not terrified of Will Howard. Like, these receivers are good, and there's a scenario where Ohio State can chunk play Tennessee to death. I think that's very much in play with these crossers and how talented they are over the middle, and where Tennessee, how thin they are at linebacker coming into this game. Like, I could see that scenario play out potentially for Tennessee. That's the new doomsday scenario, I think, is Will Howard super accurate with the football, and he has time to just chunk play Tennessee to death over the middle. But I also just think, to me, I think Tennessee's defense is going to rise to the challenge, specifically the defensive line. I'm sure Rodney Garner has been all over this team about what happened against Georgia, because Georgia's offensive line had struggled mightily the week prior against Ole Miss, and they looked like a completely different unit when they faced Tennessee. And Tennessee blitzed a lot in that game, and they just didn't get home. Like James Pierce and company were just not factors. Getting Carson back on the ground, he dropped back 40 times and just slice and dice him to death. That is how Tennessee loses to Ohio State, is if it's a Taylor Green, Carson Beck scenario where they are not taking a bunch of deep shots, but they're just slicing and dicing you to death over the middle, death by 1,000 cuts. And I don't know if Will Howard is capable of that. We'll see. But the receivers are certainly capable of it. But this is a banged up offensive line. They're on their backup center, third string tackle. Like, if Tennessee does not win the line of scrimmage in this battle, like, I think that will be the most disappointing part of it to me, Landon, is that they didn't come through in the bit as good as they've been all year, if they didn't come through in the two biggest moments of the season. And I think there is so much, I have so much interest and intrigue in how Tennessee's defensive line matches up against Ohio State, because they should win. They should have won the matchup against Georgia. I hope that history doesn't repeat itself in Columbus on Saturday.
Yeah, I'm hoping that Georgia game was kind of a wake-up call to them, being like, hey, you're not that good. Or like, you can, just because you show up doesn't mean you're going to be that good. I do agree. Like, Tennessee has to have pressure in this game. Like, they have to get to the quarterback, make him uncomfortable. I think another aspect to that is, you mentioned the Georgia, the Georgia Arkansas game. Those are two games that one position kind of stood out to me. Yeah, the defensive line, but the safeties were another thing. The safeties came up big against Alabama. That's why you ended up winning that game. But they were not good against Georgia. They weren't great against Arkansas, and those quarterbacks made you pay for it. Can those safeties, even though Ohio State does have NFL type receivers, and Andre Turrentine, Will Brooks, I don't know if they're NFL type safeties, but can they be good enough to make a few plays to prevent like a big long pass play or a touchdown? Can they get an interception or, cause a fumble or something like that? Can those two guys make some plays on this Ohio State wide receiver core to kind of flip any momentum they have going?
Yeah. Caleb, your MVP for the Vols on Saturday is going to be who? Who do you think has to have an MVP type performance for the Vols to win?
I think it's got to be someone defensive, and I think it's hard to pinpoint someone in the secondary other than like Jermod McCoy, who I think who will have a good game, but I think they'll also avoid throwing to him as much as possible. Like, there's not going to be a lot of design stuff. That's not going to be Will Howard's first read very often. I think it's probably going to be someone over the middle has to have a big game. He had an interception in the Florida game, actually, and I think that's the guy you need to play big in the run game to slow those backs down, because you don't want them to gash you. You don't want them to have explosive plays. But I also think Ohio State's going to try to utilize the tight end. They haven't much this year, but they're going to. Like, that's where they see it open the most. Arion Carter is a young guy who's going to be tasked with a lot in Tennessee's first playoff appearance. And I think that's the guy you need to have an MVP-like game. He needs to play in the backfield, but he also has to find space on the back end. If he is assigned a tight end or a running back out of the backfield in pass coverage, he's got to make a play. I think if Arion Carter has a big game, Tennessee wins.
Interesting. I think, Landon, to Kale's point, I struggle because I think I'm curious what they do, because Edwin Spillman's back. I'm curious if he has the club on his wrist for this game or not. Hopefully not, because, he's a super talented kid out of Nashville. I think he's going to play. Like, I think he kind of has to with Jalen Smith in the portal. I think he's going to have to be in the rotation. And the combination of him, Caleb Perry, who has been better in pass coverage too, like, I think he's going to have to be in the rotation. Those guys as a unit are going to have to, like, because T-Lander is just mostly in the box guy. Like, I'm not, like, it's just not going to be his game. So I'm not looking for T-Lander to have a big game over the middle in pass coverage. Like, that's just not what I'm looking for. But what I am looking for is Spillman's going to be in those. I don't see how Spillman's not in several positions in this game where he's not being asked to be out in coverage. Like, I think that he's going to be in some coverage snaps at linebacker with Arion Carter or with Caleb Perry. So I think it's just the collection of those guys. So It's a lot on Spillman right away, but I mean, it's why you're a blue chipper. And hey, welcome to the show, right?
Yeah, I mean, you've been here over a year. Like, it's time to grow up, whether you like it or not. Like, it's here.
Yeah.
And that's why you signed to play in these games. I do think linebackers is a big group. I like Jermod McCoy because, I think 3 of Tennessee's biggest wins this year, Florida, Alabama, Vanderbilt, he had a pick in all those games.
Oklahoma too.
That's true. Yep,
Yeah.
and Oklahoma. So that all 4 of his picks have been in huge moments in big games. So can he get another one? Does that kind of is it a what's it called? Just a pattern at this point? Is he able to just keep it going? I think I'm going to go offense though with my MVP. I think it has to be a receiver. I don't know exactly who that is. I would think it would have to be Dont'e.
Mm-hmm.
But man, it would be cool to see Brew just have a game where he has like 10 catches, 125 yards, and a touchdown. Like, that would be awesome to just like, hey, they refuse to play up on him, and let's just get him the football and let him go pick. I mean, use it as an extension of the run game if you have to. I would like to see a receiver really step up in this game. I think it will be Dont'e because he's been the most consistent so far, but it'd be cool to have somebody else do it too.
Yeah, I mean, I think it sounds very simple, but Dante's got to play 4 quarters. Like, Dont'e cannot get banged up and not be available in the second half, because this is going to be a game in the second half, and Dante's been electric in the first half, but he has come through for Tennessee, obviously, in the second half against Alabama with a bit, Florida. He was big in the second half. Like, he's got to be available because he's been your most reliable big play threat all season long. He's your big touchdown threat. He's your big yak guy. I think Thornton's a big one. I'm curious, to your Brew point, with how thin they are at slot right now, with Nimrod in the portal and not available, and Braylon Staley, that's asking a lot, potentially to throw him out there, who he hasn't played all year and redshirted, because these games don't count against your redshirt, so he can play. But I look at Brew in the slot, because we talked, I think, this fall about, I don't understand why Ethan Davis has not been utilized a whole lot more in the slot this season as a mismatch, because he's basically a receiver anyway out there. So I don't really understand why he has not been used more in that spot, especially with the struggles Tennessee's had getting production from the slot position this year. I think Brew in the slot could be really fun. If you're going to play Mike Matthews a lot more outside in this game, I'm curious what Ohio State does, because that's a wrinkle that teams don't have on tape, really. Brew had a touchdown in the slot earlier this season, but I'm curious if that is something that they utilize in this game, to see who they put on Brew in the slot and what kind of damage he could do for Tennessee, because that's something we haven't seen as much, and I think it could be an interesting wrinkle that they might not be prepared for.
We can block too. I mean, that's why I think it's a no-brainer. If you're that bad depth-wise at slot, and he's been here for so long, kind of knows every position, I think it has to be Brew in the slot. Because if you need to bring him in a little bit to help with protecting or run blocking, I mean, the guy's probably better than half our offensive line.
Yeah. Well, block for Mike Matthews on those screens if they do a bunch, or I think that's a possibility. I mean, Squirrel, how healthy is he? That is something that I'm very curious how they monitor this, because I just feel like he's still going to be he's fought through injuries with his shoulder and everything else all year long. But what does he keep getting snaps if it's clear he can't bring anything in, or if there's trouble, a couple drops? Is it we're still he's gonna power through, because dude's a warrior. Squirrel is going to force away on the field, but I wonder what they do. I'm look, we appreciate it, but it's just not you're just not right. You just can't do it, especially in this kind of climate and this kind of weather. I am very curious how they handled the slot and where Squirrel's at health wise in this game, because I mean, if he gets some catches, he's gonna get hit. That shoulder's gonna get popped, and I don't know where he's at health wise, and if he's gonna be able to get through this whole game.
Yeah, it doesn't help that it's going to be freezing cold either.
That first shoulder hit in the freezing cold.
Yeah, maybe it'll be numb.
He's gonna have to go John Henderson before the game. Just get it going.
Final thing here. Way too early look. So the 2025 SEC schedule is out here, fellas, and I'm curious from y'all's vantage point here, what this looks like to you. Because to me, I was pretty like I've been adamant this fall where I'm like, you got to get in the playoff this year because I think the schedule is going to be a whole lot worse for Tennessee next year. I understand it's going to be flipped and home away, but I'm like, I think it's way less likely Tennessee makes the CFP next year than they do this year. And the way the chips have fallen in front of them, and they took care of business, and we'll see what happens here on Saturday. But they got a gift that I had not anticipated here, which is they get Florida at the end of the season. They won in December, obviously, 20 plus years ago in Gainesville. They obviously have not had success in Gainesville those first in the September here for the last 20 years. Caleb, when you saw this schedule, does this look more like a 10-2 potential for Tennessee? And do you feel better about Tennessee in 25 with this schedule?
I don't know if I feel much different than 2024. I was similar to you that I thought this has got to be a year because I think every time I thought that I forgot that they're just going to flip home and home there for the teams that you played this year. I don't feel much different. I still see this team as a 9-3, 10-2 team. I think with Alabama and Florida both on the road, both places you have not won in a very long time, that right now I'm just going to go ahead and say like 2 losses until you prove me otherwise. Like that's 2 right there you can write home about. I think schedule wise, I don't know if you got it better or worse. You get Georgia on the front end, Florida on the back end. It's a little flipped. Florida was better in November this year. So that could work out against you. But of course this Billy Napier team has been everything but consistent. So they may be awful in November next year. I think there's no way to really decide. And I think the inverse is true for Georgia. That was a team that was not very good early in the year. Almost lost to Kentucky on the road. Midway through the year, they get their doors blown off of them by Georgia. And then the back end looked like a team that has won 2 national championships in the last 3 years. So it's hard to really say how this schedule lays out for you. I think it's still pretty friendly. I don't think Oklahoma is going to take a big jump. You get them in Neyland. I think Arkansas is they're in the same position we thought they were coming into 2024. When is Sam Pittman going to get fired? Bunch of guys jumping ship there. I don't know. It doesn't change much for me. I think there are some interesting things to talk about with Florida on the back end and Georgia there in the front. So we'll see. I don't think you could ask for a better one unless you're Texas. I'm sure they get a nice one again.
Yeah, but Landon, I look at this. I think it's better to get Georgia early. Like Gunnar Stockton, new quarterback. We'll see what they're looking like. Get it at home. Obviously, Tennessee.
You think it'll be Stockton?
I think it'll be Stockton, yeah.
You don't think it's Rashada?
I don't think so. I feel like the Rashada thing is just to like reset just get some good coaching and then bounce to his final stop where he gets a real opportunity. I feel like
why wouldn't they let him hand the ball off? Would that have burned his red shirt? That shouldn't have, right? It's postseason
I don't think
play?
so. Well, he didn't hand it off. It was back.
Yeah, I know. That's what I'm saying. Why didn't they let him hand it off?
Oh, that's a good question.
Third string they trust.
I think that is that.
Or was that to say to the College Football Playoff Committee he's going to be healthy?
Yeah.
Well, I think Kirby said it was going to be Puglisi if it wasn't back, so it wasn't even going to be Rashada. I don't think. They're a true freshmen. So
conspiracy brain. Do we think that was the reason though? Do you think they said if we don't roll him out here for this play, and we lose this game, theoretically they could keep us out?
Yeah, I think so.
I would have rided for Georgia if that had happened. That would have been the most bullcrap of all time.
I also just look at the schedule to me, Landon. I think it's just good. 2 of your road SEC games are, I think, 2 of the worst teams in the conference at Mississippi State, at Kentucky. You feel good about both those games. We talk about the Florida. We don't know what they're going to be like at the end of the year, but we do know that Tennessee will get Kentucky on the road. Should be a win. They'll be favored at home against Oklahoma, favored at home against New Mexico State. So they could be riding a 3-game winning streak at least because they have Bama obviously before that. But Bama is the only one I have circled where I'm like definitively like I don't think that's a win for Tennessee. But I like Georgia early. Like I just think that is a better situation. I at least like the fact that they're flipping this and they're making it. I'm tired of losing to Florida on the road in Gainesville in September, and I'm tired of these cold Georgia-Tennessee games where Georgia just curb stomps Tennessee in the second half of these games. So for me, I think it's a win just in terms of like, let's see if playing them at different times can make a difference in these two rivalry games at the very least.
Yeah, I think it's something different, and I mean, I guess that's just for the fan base to really hold on to because a lot of these players probably haven't really played. I mean, how many Florida they played? Maybe Florida once in September, so maybe it's. I think it's just a. I do think your probably toughest game right now, looking at it, is probably Georgia, and that's at home.
You think it's tougher than going to Bama?
I mean, what is? That's another thing. Who are the quarterbacks?
True.
I mean, Ty Simpson.
Ty Simpson, baby.
Yeah.
I'm not worried about Ty Simpson. At least right now, like what I know now, no. But I don't know if is Gunnar Stockton even alive? Do we know?
He's gonna. I mean, we'll see him in 2 weeks.
Just say he's the starter, right?
I don't know. I mean, he got his bell rung.
But the fact that he held on to the ball, wild. Like that's a warrior stuff. Like that's why he's got the respect those dudes.
Yeah, his
love
eyes
in that
popped
locker
out
room.
of his head. They didn't even
He
hold
held
on
onto
to
the
his
ball.
head. Yeah.
And then like Georgia, just their luck there, it just drives me nuts. Like Tennessee, obviously, 2 balls in the ground in the same drive, and Tennessee can't get on either of them. Like the Georgia stuff. Like it just,
Well, they weren't catches apparently.
that was also
The
goodness
real
gracious.
quick, just tangent. The calling that jet sweep a pass, that has flown under the radar as one of the things that has ruined football.
ruined football.
Like making that a passing statistic,
It shouldn't be a passing
making that
statistic,
a non-fumble.
yeah.
That's insanity.
But that's why it's such a great play call for these coaches. It's like, oh, because if you drop it, who cares? Like it's an incomplete pass. Like it's a cheat code basically if you pull it off.
Right? Don't we normally fix the cheat codes people find?
Yeah. Because it's not
You
a
should
pass.
have to throw it overhanded. If you're going to do it that
Right.
close,
If it's
not
not
underhanded, it should be a fumble.
if
There
I
you go.
exchange, if I run a read option and I exchange the ball forward, that's not a pass.
Yeah.
And it's not, and if he drops it, my running back drops it, we drop it in the exchange. Because I mean, technically by rule, if we go back and look, Nico might not have fumbled against Florida. That might have been in front of him by the time that gets blown up. Why is that not a pass?
Yeah.
It leaves his hands. I mean, obviously he dropped it.
Can I say this?
I think it's dumb. I hate it.
When you're worried about Florida down the stretch here, here's their 3 games before they play Tennessee at home. Georgia and Jacksonville, at Kentucky, where Kentucky's owned them the last 4 years, at Ole Miss, who I think is going to be really good again, and then Tennessee. Like, they could be reeling at that point down the
Wasn't
stretch.
that
I mean, their schedule's still brutal. They still go to LSU. They go to Miami in back-to-back weeks. They get Texas at home. They go to A&M. I don't like. I think it's better to get. I think it's better to get Florida down the stretch next year. I think that's to me. I had 9-3 next year. I have 10-2. Like I think this is a 10-2 schedule for Tennessee. I think they win in Gainesville with this.
There's no bad stretches. Like your toughest stretch is Alabama, Arkansas, which is a home game, Kentucky on the road, and then Oklahoma back at home. That's your toughest stretch, and that's not.
You're winning 3-4.
What you've done in past years, that's not a tough stretch. Not that I don't think there'll be some tough games in there, it's Arkansas home, Alabama road, Kentucky road, Oklahoma home. That's not a bad stretch by any imagination. You get off before the Arkansas game. You get off after the Oklahoma game. That sets up really nicely. Like I said, for me, it's just go win in the swamp. And maybe it's the whole September thing. I don't know. That'd be cool. But I just don't believe Tennessee can win in the swamp till they win in the swamp, personally.
That's fair.
Where's the bad road loss? Because, I mean, that's been we were talking about patterns earlier. There's been a pattern there. So I would love to say 10-2 here, but until Josh Heupel can prove that he doesn't have one bad road loss a year,
it's got to be the fireable offense loss, right?
Well, I think the bad road loss is probably Bama
Kentucky.
next year.
Yeah.
If I had to look at it, it's probably Bama.
Well,
so that would be nice to get it.
Lose.
That would, one that he shouldn't lose, but that'd be a nice one to get out of your system, right? If that's your only one, be like, just lose to Alabama.
Yeah. Because I don't see them losing Kentucky. Hasn't happened. Won't happen. I think Kentucky's going to be awful next year. I don't think he's losing to Levy, and just that roster still could be awful next year.
Good
I understand
God.
start Vegas with the Cowbells. Like that's the one that you would circle of like, that's oof. That would hurt. That's the Arkansas one for next year. I probably
It can't be a trap game though, right? Even if you somehow beat Georgia, you get UAB in between them, so that's nice.
Yeah. That's not coming off a bye because the Arkansas game came off a bye, and
This one's coming, or this Arkansas game this year's coming off a bye. I don't.
But it's at home. He's lost one home game in the last 3 years. I'm penciling in all these home wins. Like I'm just gonna keep doing that until Heupel and this group start dropping.
Patterns.
It's another pattern. Like I'm not worried about Tennessee at home. Like that's not really in outside of Georgia, and we'll see what that looks like. He's got to beat Georgia at some point, right? You got to win at Alabama at some point, right? You got to win at Florida at some point, right? And if you just do one of those next year, you're 10-2, and back in the playoff.
Yeah, you've got over the hump of beating Florida and Alabama. We just got to do it on the road.
Yeah, just one of those, or just beat Georgia in either place, and then win one of those two. Like,
I would like to know. I did say, and you thought I was crazy for it. I was like, I think we're definitely beating Alabama this year. Florida, I'm like, I feel terrible about. On paper, Florida was a closer game than Alabama. It went to overtime.
Yeah.
I don't know. Florida, there's just something about that. I think you could tell me, Caleb, we go 11-1 next year, and you lost to Florida in November in Ben Hill Griffin. I'd be like, yeah, that makes sense. Doesn't surprise me one bit.
Sweeping Alabama and Georgia and then losing to Florida
Would be the most Tennessee thing ever. I agree.
But you're in the playoffs. So
yeah, I don't really. Yeah, that's the other thing. It's like I don't really.
You're
care
probably you're definitely in the SEC championship game if you do that.
Yeah.
I guess it depends how Georgia shook out. If that's
right now,
if
a
they're the only
quarterback.
loss,
I'm
it'd be
more
three-way
scared of
tie.
Lagway than what Georgia and Alabama have.
Yes.
The schedule is just so bad. Like LSU or Florida's schedule is worse next year. I think. Like I think it's worse than it is this year.
Yeah, Lagway may not be playing against you if that offensive line is the same.
Yeah.
They've gone all in, obviously in NIL, but this offseason, I'm not buying.
It
I think the
takes
schedule just
one.
sucks.
It takes what, a couple losses, and then all that NIL money that they spend is gone. All those kids are gone.
I mean, at LSU, this stretch is insane. At LSU, at Miami, Texas, and then at A&M. They will not be favored in any of those 4 games.
Hate to see it. Could happen to a better program.
Landon, Raby, Caleb Mitchell, what can the good folks check out from you and the team over at More Important Issues this week? Fox Sports Knoxville, and then watch party this weekend.
Yeah, we'll have we'll be live in studio Thursday night at 8:00. So tune into that on Fox Sports Knox. And then we're having a watch party at Local Smoky, teaming up with Fox Sports and us, kind of co-branding a little watch party, and hopefully everybody can come out and hang out with us, and let's bring home a victory from the crib.
There we go. I love it. Caleb Mitchell, Landon Raby, thank you as always, and I'll talk to y'all next week.
Thanks, Chase.
Nicely done, nephew. The Chase Thomas Podcast. Hell yeah.